Welcome to Aspen Leading Edge. I'm Patty Roberts from St. Mary's University School of Law. And today's guest is William McGeveran. He is the Dean and William S. Patty Professor of Law, spelled differently than Patty Roberts, I might add. He has been the dean since this year, 2024. He's the 12th dean of the University of Minnesota Law School. But you're no stranger to the University of Minnesota Law School, having been the interim dean and the associate dean of academic affairs. So welcome to the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me. And on the faculty since 2006, so I'm coming up on 20 years here.
Holy cow. Well, there couldn't have been much in the way of surprises. Maybe you can confirm or deny. Any surprises once you stepped into this role?
Oh, sure. Being the dean is different than any other job. And even as permanent dean as opposed to interim, it's definitely different because people are wanting to know that you are ready to guide the school for the next 5 years or 10 years, not just keeping things running this month.
After being on the faculty for nearly 2 decades, what prompted you to want to sit in the dean's office?
Well, I really love the place. And I had been, as you said, associate dean under Gary Jenkins, who was our dean for 7 years and a really great one.
And now a great president, right?
And now a great president of Bates College, where I got to see him inaugurated a few months ago. And it was really exciting to see him take that next step on his journey. But, Gary had taken us from a pretty challenging situation to a really strong situation. Like most law schools, we had been hit pretty hard aftermath of the Great Recession when the number of law applicants nationwide cut by half in a long-term way. And, that came with consequential budget challenges. And he really righted the ship. And he did lots of other important things, too. He really increased and enhanced our diversity. He did a bunch of programmatic things. He ran a successful capital campaign. So I got to sort of be at his elbow and we navigated COVID, right? Don't forget about that. So I got to sit at his elbow for a lot of that. And honestly, I love this place. I've been here a long time. I'm very loyal to it. And I felt like there were things that I could help us do as an internal dean that I wasn't sure a new external person would have been able to do as well. And so that's why I put myself forward.
Well, that's terrific. I envy you a little bit being an internal dean. I took over this position during COVID, so I needed to try to build trust while everyone was on global lockdown. But you got to take that position on already having trust from the appropriate stakeholders. And so where are some of the areas that you're excited that you're just going to be able to grab that baton and run with at Minnesota?
A few places, really. Partly it's just keeping on doing some of the great stuff that we already do here. I think we have a very highly cited and excellent faculty with extraordinary high scholarly profile in many different fields. And I'm sure a lot of people listening are thinking of the people that they know on our faculty now, because in whatever field you do, there's a good chance that there's someone in our school that is a real contributor to that field. So partly it's just keeping up with that and with the high caliber scholarship and the very strongly interdisciplinary scholarship. I like to brag that we're someone did a study and counted citations outside of law journals for law faculties, and we had more than anybody. So we're very strong in that way. I think that we have a ways to go around getting, frankly, the kind of national reputation that I think we deserve and that would help open doors for our students. So I think it's helpful to have a New Yorker at a Minnesota school. I'm from the Bronx originally, and I'm happy to boast. And I know deeply all of the things there are to boast about. And I think as an external candidate, you come in and you learn the place. I'm ready to boast right now.
That's outstanding.
That's part of what we have to do. We have to sort of tell our story to everybody, and that means employers, alumni, potential donors, prospective students, and help people understand that we've got a gem here in the upper Midwest that they should already know about. I'm also really excited about, I think a lot of the next phase of development of legal education is going to be around figuring out how to integrate high quality training in skills, experiential education, clinical education. That's also an area where we have a lot of strengths, maybe underrecognized, and it's something I'm pretty passionate about, having done teaching in some of those areas myself. And I just think we have so much upside potential, and we have a head start on many schools. We have really strong clinical and experiential education, particularly for a school of our sort of general stature. And I'm excited to really lean into that and develop it further, because not only for the good of our school and our students, but honestly, because I think it's so clearly one of the big challenges in front of legal education overall. And it's exciting to me to be a part of helping lead that movement towards better integrated experiential ed.
Well, as a clinician myself, I am intrigued to hear that you have a robust clinical program. I'd love to learn more about it. What kinds of clinics do you offer your students? What's the size of and scope of your program?
So I told you I brag, right? I think we have one of the oldest clinical programs in the United States. It's over 100 years old. It's also one of the largest, and I think it's one of the strongest and most innovative. We have 28 clinics.
Oh, you weren't kidding. That's over 100 years old and 28 clinics. That's extraordinary.
28 clinics. We have certainly the largest immigration-related clinical program in the United States. We have a very large endowment for the Binger Center for New Americans at the law school, which is an immigration center, which has a separate independent $25 million endowment and includes 4 different immigration clinics.
If I can ask, when was that gift made? Is that something because of the of recent years and the challenges with migration, or was that done?
No, it was a generous alum who gave us our largest single gift that we've ever received. It came into place before the first Trump administration. But, immigration challenges have been something that the country's been dealing with for a few decades now, and it's been a real underserved area or legal assistance, of course. So I think the year was probably 2000. Don't quote me on this. It's probably 2012, maybe? Yeah.
I was wondering if it was more a result of recent years,
No.
but that's
It's
extraordinary.
it's about 10 years old. There's 4 clinics and a bunch of programming and stuff as well. But we also have, so we run the gamut from very traditional clinics like criminal law, family law, tax law, to we have an intellectual property and entrepreneurship clinic and a small business clinic. But then we have some much more kind of cutting edge clinics that I think are of interest to a bunch of students. We have a gun violence prevention clinic that represents the state of Minnesota in defending gun laws under the newer Supreme Court decisions like Bruin.
Now, is that a recent clinic? I think
It's very recent.
yeah, I thought I read about that. Yeah.
Yep. So that's a new recent clinic taught by a member of our faculty who came to us from a gun violence organization. And the students are briefing high intensity constitutional issues in Minnesota county courts, right? Because they're coming in on behalf, they're basically coming to support local prosecutors who want to defend the validity of these firearms laws that are on the books. We just started also in the last several years a name, image, likeness clinic as that issue has exploded. And their clients are mostly from within the university, and they're basically college athletes and influencers who need to figure out how to handle the very newfangled intellectual property that they suddenly find themselves in possession of. And so that's a really interesting clinic.
Oh, I bet your students,
Yeah.
they
They love it. And it's also exciting to me because we have a good cluster of transactional clinics. Clinics have so often been heavily slanted towards litigation. Well, in fact, all of law school has been so often slanted to litigation, and having clinics that really foreground transactional skills, I think, is really beneficial. So the significant majority of our students take a clinic. We have this very large number and very wide variety of them. And then the other thing to say is our clinical model has long been, for many decades, has been full year 2L clinics, which is also not
That's unusual. Yeah.
so rising 2Ls, the majority of them register for clinic. They're in the clinic for the entire year. It's usually 6, 7 credits, sometimes 8 credits. And then a subset of those students stay on as 3Ls to be clinic directors, which is essentially a more senior role. It's still accredited educational experience, but they take on essentially the function of the senior associate of the clinic, assisting the faculty member. For a lot of our students, it becomes a really central part of their law school experience and a really rich one. You're spending that whole second year and then often continuing for your third year in the same area. Lots of folks end up developing careers in the areas that their clinics are in, but regardless of that, the skill payoff for them is so high. The client interaction, the intensive supervision of their writing, the strategizing around cases over a long term, right? A year-long clinic lets you watch more of the case unfold for longer. So I think that model, which we've used for a long time, is really successful. It's resource intensive, but we've been able to devote the resources to it, and it's been great for our students.
So How many students would you estimate take a clinic in their second year?
The majority of our students, so probably about 60%, I think.
Fantastic, okay. And your class sizes, what size are they for your whole
200, about 200 in each 1L class nowadays. It used to be, it's been different numbers in the past, but in recent time, it's about 200.
Well, I would think that that would be great for certainly their career projection, also for those who are selected to be the senior associates, if you will.
Yep.
But also, I would think then that gives them their third year to maybe do some externships or other work that is in that field that they now have a specialty in from spending a year with it.
You are absolutely right about that, and that happens very frequently. We've done some other pretty big experiential things in our curriculum that I'm also proud of, and one of them is that we've really leaned into field placements. One of the advantages we have over some other schools is that we are in the middle of this large urban location with a sophisticated legal market, but not too large, right? So the Green Line light rail train is out the back door of the law school building of Walter Mondale Hall, where we're located. And the train, if you take it one direction into St. Paul, goes to the center of city government, state government, where all the nonprofits have their headquarters. And if you take it the other direction, it goes to downtown Minneapolis with all law firms and corporate headquarters and such.
Very convenient.
Yeah, the result of that is we've more than tripled the number of field placements in the last 6 or so years. So we're really, in addition to the fact that we've always had this robust clinical program and have been growing it, but we've always had it, we've really dramatically expanded field placements. We've dramatically expanded the number of simulation-based courses that we have, and often those are taught by adjuncts who are frequently our alumni from our local legal community, and it's convenient for them to do so and to come once or twice a week and participate in that teaching of skills to our students. And then for more than 10 years, we've had a very elaborate 1L course called Law and Practice that is a mandatory 1L class that is also heavily oriented to what some people call skills. But what I love about the class, and I've taught this class, is the students are in a large group that does the legal analysis of the simulated case they have. And there's a litigation case and a transaction file each semester. So they are in a large task, so they're doing the legal analysis. That's early in the week. Then late in the week, they go to their small group simulation. It might be a witness interview or a deposition or a mediation or a negotiation. And they go and do that based on the analysis they've done. They're asking questions to find out the information that they need for their legal theory. They're making negotiation officers based on their understanding of what the law is. Then they learn information from those simulations, and the next week they go back, and in the beginning of the week analytical class, they reassess. So they're doing what lawyers really actually do, which is not go deal with some skills in isolation and then also go learn and think about some law in isolation, but put them together as a continuous iterative process. And I think that that sets our students up as first years really well to be ready, for example, to do those 2L clinics.
And is that also your legal writing class, or is this separate from legal writing?
Separate from legal writing, we also have a strong year-long legal writing class for the 1Ls. So this has some written work in it, but it is not the legal writing class. It's its own, sort of pedagogically distinct offering. And it's about how you think about your work as a lawyer and fact investigation or exploring client interests against the backdrop of what the law is. And the other thing I should say is we have our assistant dean of experiential education has developed what he calls the experiential ensemble, which is a group of local, essentially actors, and they're trained. We stole this idea from medical schools, which have done it forever, where they have standardized patients and doctors in training go in and do interviews with standardized patients to figure out their symptoms and also to get experience at patient care. So we basically have taken that model. So we have these trained actors who are being the witnesses, the clients, the sometimes opposing parties who are well briefed in the case and do their part, but you're not doing a simulation where you're like having one of your classmates go up against you and it's kind of the artificiality of it is really clear. It's this person you've never seen before who's the right sort of age and demeanor to be the client you're really going to be interviewing or the witness you're really going to be questioning.
Now, are these community members, or are they like students from the theater department at Minnesota University? Or
No, community members. We have a really pretty thriving theatrical community here. The city leaders like to brag that it's the second most theater seats per capita after New York. So there's a lot of actors who could use the extra work.
Well, that's handy.
Yeah. And I mean, the last thing to say about all of this is this means not only that our students are getting this amazing training, right, but we're providing so much to the community. 28 clinics is an awful lot of free legal services across a whole range of domains. And never mind, when the field placements are unpaid, we also count that as pro bono work. Some of them are paid and they don't, but when they're unpaid, we count them. And of course, students have all kinds of other volunteer activities they do. So when we counted up the pro bono hours that our students gave in a year, it was 97,400 hours.
That is extraordinary.
Yeah. And we didn't realize this until I did the thinking, but I said 97,400 hours and I got a pen and paper and I said, if you were a large law firm associate in New York billing the number of hours you were supposed to, that's your career. 97,000 hours is one big law lawyer a year that we're giving to the community in free legal services.
Incredible. So I'm curious, you said you've been doing clinics for over 100 years, which I find that unusual. I think that's
There weren't 28 of them in the beginning.
well, of course. They're hard to build, they're expensive, I know. But I wonder, why did you all have clinics so much earlier than the rest of the academy or the majority of the academy?
So, I mean, partly it's that there were some people who were here 100 years ago who had the vision to do that, right? I mean, they saw law office training, as they sometimes called it in those days, as being a part of a well-rounded legal education. Once you've got that vision installed in the place, you can sustain it, but you didn't need someone to come in and impose it. It was already here. I think it's also connected, particularly as the decades passed, it's connected with the fact that we are a flagship public law school that's part of a land-grant university. We have a responsibility to the people of this state, and providing these services is one way that we can fulfill that responsibility. At this point, the majority of our students come from outside of Minnesota. But, we're still a public institution of Minnesota, and giving that back to the state, I think, has always been something that has been valued here. And so that is another reason I think clinics were here early and at a large scale.
That makes sense. So President Jenkins left you a law school in outstanding shape. You helped to make it so because you were Associate Dean for Academic Affairs. But now you're starting a new chapter. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about your vision for what you'd like your legacy as a dean to be when you step down many, many, many years from now.
Yeah, so I don't know how many. We're in month 4 or 5 here. So
Yes, and the average is what, 3.5 or something?
yeah, so well. I think we'll go longer than that. In the shorter term, we're doing some very important things, including expanding our faculty, which has gotten a little small for the ambitions we have, both the scholarly ambitions and the teaching ambitions. So we're pretty actively hiring, and that's taking up a good amount of our bandwidth. The thing I said before about getting the reputation that I think we have earned on a nationwide basis is really a top priority for me. I've been calling it the Tim Walz effect a little bit because of obvious recent political events. Right? So, of course, our governor, Tim Walz, was put on the Democratic ticket as the vice presidential candidate. He had been the governor for 6 years. He'd been a member of the House for a decade before that. He had this list of things that he'd done, love them or hate them. It was a long and ambitious list. And I saw right after he was put on the ticket, I saw a panel with a national political reporter for the New York Times who said unashamedly, I didn't know who this guy was until 2 weeks ago. And that's a Minnesota thing and a Midwestern thing, right? I'm from New York and I understand how this works. If Tim Walz had been the governor of Maryland, he would already have been famous to national political reporters. But when you're out here, sometimes people overlook you and that's their problem. But we have to push against that problem. So I am committed to raising the national profile of this law school so that our faculty's thinking is taken seriously at every corner, and that our students have opportunity for all types of jobs in every place in the country. And that's been definitely improving over time. I mean, we send large proportion of our students now to all the major legal markets. So we're no longer, and 70% of our students come from outside Minnesota. So we are a national law school. That's the reality. But I want it to also be fully the perception within legal education and within the bench and bar. So that's a big part of it. And then, as I mentioned before, the idea of helping lead the transformation of the content of legal education, not just to add skills, which is too often the way people have talked about it in the past, but to integrate all of the different elements about what lawyers do every day. They think, they analyze, they issue spot, they write, they talk, they interview, they speak, they counsel. All of those are parts of the package, and we should be doing a holistic education that addresses all of them with excellence.
So Minnesota certainly seems to have found that sweet spot, and you've received some accolades for your experiential learning curriculum, correct? You want to share that with
Yeah,
our listeners?
we have. I told you I'm happy to boast. I'm always happy to boast. So, National Jurist does a practical learning ranking. We're always near the top of it. And it's an objective ranking. It's not reputational, right? If they actually go in and they count up how many opportunities are there, how many students take advantage of them, what things are required in the curriculum, how much more than the minimum is this school doing when it comes to experiential learning. And our ranking is 5th most recently. We're always in the top 10. And of course, we have a strong U.S. News ranking. We've most recently been 16th for several years. And except for 1 year when one other school in Ithaca snuck into the list, we're the only ones who are consistently in the top of both. And that's important to me because, as I say, this is about integrating all of it together, right? Being a intellectually excellent school that is engaging in practical professional education. And we have the law and practice course that I mentioned. That first year course gets consistent accolades. The Bloomberg Innovation Award has gone to it multiple times. So we do get, I think, for people who are looking for it, for people who are saying, I want to find schools that are really ahead of the curve in doing experiential education, I think we get recognized really well. And that's, I think, just demonstrates the job we're doing and that we're still growing. Our simulation courses, our clinics, and our field placements are all expanding rapidly. We're doing more and we're doing it in increasingly innovative ways. But it's nice to know that the people who go out and look around the country for who's doing it well are recognizing what we're doing here.
Well, and I imagine, experiential learning, clinical opportunities, you and I are always going to agree, are outstanding experiences for our students in preparing them to be lawyers and judges. But also we have the next gen bar on the horizon that deans have to think about, faculties have to think
Right.
about.
Yeah, so I think, first of all, the fact of the next gen bar, after literally decades of talking about it, is actually happening is really an indicator, first of all, that everybody in the profession has finally come to the realization that we don't need to just talk about the need to do this. We need to move on it. And that's exciting to me. It also means that we have this multiple decades head start, and a lot of my fellow deans are sort of waking up and saying, we better figure out what to do here. They're definitely welcome to give me a call. I can tell them what we're doing. So when we look at our curriculum and say, what do we need to do to adjust to be for our students to be ready for the next gen bar, and our 1L students who take the Minnesota bar are going to be taking the next gen because Minnesota's going online in just a few years with next gen. So the 1Ls now, if they elect to take the Minnesota bar, this is them. It's here. It's not just the future. But when we looked to see what we had to change about our curriculum, the answer was nothing. We don't have to make any changes. We're there already.
Well, I really am intrigued by this second year clinic experience, full year clinic experience. I think that would not only prepare them well for next gen, but also give them a great deal of confidence that a lot of students maybe don't have in some other law schools.
And I think, one of the things we say about the whole range of experiential education, we tell our students from the very beginning, we say, make your mistakes here, right? This is the place that in a structured environment with very smart faculty and practitioners who are able to watch and critique and identify, but also support your improvement. This is the place to practice practicing law. And I think that setting up really early opportunities to do that. So having law and practice be a 1L class, having the clinics be during the second year is confidence building and also the opportunity to get through those early rookie mistakes that everyone will make, no matter how smart they are or what they got on the LSAT. It's going to be a learning process for all of us, and let's get that underway.
Before we get to our final question, I noticed you are an expert in information law, especially data privacy,
Yeah.
communications technology, free speech. You've written a casebook, privacy and data protection law, and regularly teach a data privacy course. Is Minnesota law far ahead of the rest of us in those kinds of courses, would you say, or is there still work to be done?
Both. So I'm continuing to teach as dean, and I'm teaching the data privacy. One of my colleagues, Alan Rosenstein, is also a information law scholar, including not just privacy, but platform regulation and surveillance and things like that. So we're strong in that area. It's my conviction that and I wrote a casebook, and so I of course think everyone should be teaching it. But the reality is there's not too many other topics that are going to be as pervasive in every area of legal practice in the years to come compared to data privacy. You could be doing a deal and due diligence is now automatically going to be asking, are there liabilities here? Are there potential security breaches? Is there data that they hold that is restricted by law in some way that its value might be altered? There's employment privacy, there's student privacy, there's, of course, criminal law privacy. Every business is dealing with personal data, and as personal data becomes increasingly regulated, every lawyer is going to need to have some understanding of it. So a law school that is not yet teaching data privacy, in my view, is seriously behind the curve. By the way, there's jobs. There's lots of jobs for our students in data privacy.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So the International Association of Privacy Professionals, which is the main trade group, has a slogan that they use that's sitting on my professor office door, my faculty office door, which says, "Privacy is not dead, it's hiring." That's definitely true, and it's especially true for JDs. So it's not only that all lawyers will need to know something about it, it's that for those who want to specialize in it, it's a little bit like intellectual property was 25 years ago. It's exploding, and students should have the opportunity to get themselves ready for those jobs.
All right. Well, as my last question, I'd like to ask you what your predictions are for the future of legal education in the coming decade.
So not surprisingly, Patty, one of them is that more schools are going to try and imitate the University of Minnesota Law School and follow this path of significantly focusing on intellectually rigorous practical training. So, I think that we have an assistant dean of experiential education, Mitch Zamoff, who comes out of practice, but is also a scholar. And I think we're going to see way more focus on that kind of curricular change and even that kind of way of teaching classes that have henceforth been more traditional. We're going to see more and more. We're already seeing this some. I think we're much more broad adoption of exercises and practical focus in rich intellectual courses in the first year and beyond. So that's one of the biggest trends. I'm a data privacy and technology scholar. So, of course, my other maybe predictable answer is going to be that developing digital technology is going to dramatically change the practice of law, which, of course, means it should dramatically change legal education. Artificial intelligence is the current technology that people are paying a lot of attention to, and rightly so. We've already integrated discussion of how to responsibly and effectively use AI in practice in our 1L legal writing course, and we're hiring a specialized librarian in our library who's going to be talking about new technology in legal practice as their main focus. So I think a lot of schools are going to be wrestling with the question of what should students know about things like prompt engineering and access to language models that was not a question even on our list 5 years ago. And it's going to, in the next 5 years, be among the most important skills that are going to be missing from our curriculum and need to be added.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Well, thank you so much for sharing the great news about all the things that are happening at the University of Minnesota Law School. And Bill, congratulations on being the 12th Dean of the Law School in 2024. Appreciate your time today.
Oh, thank you so much. This is a fun conversation. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you. And if you're listening and would like to hear from other thought leaders in the Legal Academy, please access additional episodes of the Aspen Leading Edge podcast on your favorite podcast channel or the Aspen Leading Edge webpage. Thank you.